if somebody asks a question immediately when we say something, there's still a delay, I think.
Yeah. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to the Off by One stream. I'm going to give it just a second here for it to connect to YouTube, X, and LinkedIn, just so no one misses anything. But yeah, Didier, it takes about 10 seconds for whatever reason for the questions to show up once asked. Great. Cool. Hey, AZ, Reform, see your questions already, so we'll get to those soon. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the Off by One security stream. This week, we have two streams this week. One today with the amazing Didier Stebbins and Maxime Thibault. And on Thursday is our next stream. That one's going to be talking about fuzzing Linux kernel modules. So a lot of people have been asking for more advanced content on fuzzing and bug discovery. So that would be an exciting one as well. Today, though, we're going to take a look at the BRICKSTORM APT, which of course is a Chinese-backed actor, and I believe it originally targeted Linux vCenter servers, but these guys will correct me because they've done a lot of research on it, and I'm pretty much going to let them run with this for the most part because they've got a presentation and also some interactive demo part. Definitely encourage anyone, if you do have questions, please go ahead and ask them if they're related to the content that's being presented at that time. We'll go ahead and ask that question and answer it for you. Otherwise, we will wait to the end if it's just more a general question. But again, feel free to ask questions. So I guess go ahead, Didier and Maxime, if you want to give a little background about yourself and your work at NVISO.
Okay, thanks, Steven. So I'm Didier Stevens. I develop a lot of free open source tools in Python that help to do reverse engineering of malware, for example. That's one thing, and all kinds of analysis forensics. I work for NVISO, and I'm also a senior handler at the Internet Storm Center, where I regularly publish diary entries.
All right, and my name is Maxime, so I'm a colleague of Didier. I can benefit of most of his tooling throughout the malware analysis that I perform. Occasionally, I also manage to break him, but Didier is always kind enough to fix them quite rapidly. And in my free time, I try to support the DFIR report as well in malware analysis and intrusion analysis. I don't know, Didier, if you want to explain why we picked this topic and what the added value is going to be for the audience.
Yes, Maxime. So we are going to talk about a malware, a piece of malware that is developed by an APT group. It's a backdoor that allows you to do many things. And so we are going to show you how it works, how the protocol works, things like that. And this might inspire you to do similar stuff. For example, adversary emulation, and that you try to do what this backdoor does. For example, I think Maxime will cover that, but this backdoor has a C2 channel and it communicates over WebSockets. So that is something that you could do when you're doing an assessment. It's see, can I establish an WebSocket to my C2 server from the environment of the client? And is this detected by the client if I use this as a C2 channel? So that's what inspired us a bit to talk about this subject here.
Cool. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Also, we have a Discord server with over 2,000 members, and it's another thing that comes up oftentimes is kind of more understanding on reversing malware and APT tools and things like that. So definitely exciting. I don't know if you want to answer the question from AZ now, or if that's something you're going to cover later on in the presentation.
I can definitely answer it now because we're not going to focus on the forensics at the moment. But basically, the question is if you have any preference for the MFT or journal data analysis tooling-wise. So quite frankly, on that one, any tooling almost does the trick. So what I personally like is the MFT CMD from Eric Zimmerman. The reason being that it allows us to export the entire MFT, the journal, into a JSON file, and we typically then import it into our data analysis stack. We use the Azure Data Explorer, where we can just use Kustoc to query, build timelines, cross-reference it with other logs, security logs, and so on. So that's my personal preferred method of working. I don't know, Didier, if you have another one.
Well, as you know, Maxime, I also use JSON, but if I can, I am more into CSV with my tools to help me analyze CSV files.
Great.
All
Thanks.
right, lovely. And then a quick additional tip. So because I see that AZ is saying that he'll check out the Azure stuff, you can definitely run a custom Azure Data Explorer Docker container. So Microsoft has a development version. You can run it locally to play around, to also use it locally if you want to analyze data without exporting it to Azure directly.
Cool.
All right, so off to the presentation, I suppose. If at any point there are questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we'll answer them. So let's start. So we'll start by covering a short introduction about it. We already talked a bit about it, and then we'll talk about attribution first of all. So what is BRICKSTORM? So BRICKSTORM, it's a Go backdoor. So it's written in the Go language, which originally targeted VMware vCenter servers. It was first observed by Mandiant, I think more than a year ago nowadays. And it supports the ability to set itself up as a web server. So as opposed to other malwares, other beacons, which actually beacon to a server, what's quite funny about this one is that it has the logic to be a server, and it will act as a server, and the actual C2 server is going to act as a client. The backdoor is capable of performing file system and directory manipulations. It can perform file operations such as uploading or downloading files, run shell commands, and perform SOX relaying. The BRICKSTORM backdoor communicates over WebSockets to a hard-coded C2, as Didier previously explained. There is another organization which had the unfortunate encounter with that backdoor a few weeks or months after Mandiant did, and it was MITRE. So as you might know, MITRE has been a victim of an intrusion a few months ago, and during the intrusion, rogue virtual machines were deployed, which actually contained the BRICKSTORM backdoor, as well as persistence mechanism. Here, the VMs were configured with dual network interfaces to make sure that the backdoor both has access to the internet for its command and control server, but also access to the core administrative subnets within the MITRE network. Now, who's known to deploy BRICKSTORM? So BRICKSTORM, as far as we know, this is an attribution performed by Mandiant, but BRICKSTORM is attributed to UNC 5221, which is a suspected China-nexus espionage threat actor. It's a threat actor which targets a wide range of operations which are of interest to China as a whole. It's one of the only groups which has been exploiting specific CVEs before they were publicly known. So it's a group known to exploit 0 days. And more than a year ago, we already encountered it when we identified a few other backdoors on the Ivanti appliances. Now, there's a quote from former FBI Director James Comey who highlights the current Chinese threat in Europe and the US. It's that there are two kinds of big companies. There are those who've been hacked by the Chinese and those who don't know they've been hacked by the Chinese. And this is typically a backdoor that we found in an organization which didn't know yet that they had been hacked by the Chinese. So what are the capabilities of BRICKSTORM? So BRICKSTORM, as we previously explained, has a file manager capability. So the screenshots that you are seeing are actually real screenshots. So this is the UI that you get once you access the backdoor, and it's a UI which is served by the backdoor itself. So the HTML and the logic of the server, it's all in the backdoor itself. You can browse the file system of the compromised host. You can have an entire directory listing, as you can see. And you can also download and upload any arbitrary file. So this can definitely be used for exfiltration or for the staging of additional tools. It furthermore has a full web API. So there are some operations which are a bit more complex, like getting stats of files, creating directories. It is not something which can easily be done using the web UI, but for that, the Backdoor has a JSON-based API. You can create directories, delete files, you can even patch existing files through that API. It also has network tunneling capabilities. So the network tunneling allows the attacker to proxy whatever connections they want through the backdoor, and it allows them, for example, to move laterally using RDP or SMB. This also means that no direct code execution is required. So why is this interesting? Nowadays, a lot of complexity for the red teamers is to avoid EDRs from flagging their direct code execution. How this one worked, the backdoor was deployed at the later stage of the intrusion, but that meant that the adversary had valid credentials in the environment. So by proxying their network connectivity, they were actually able to just use the valid credentials to obtain code execution either interactively through RDP or programmatically over SMB. Now, a quick interactive demo. So allow me a few seconds in order to switch screens. It's not something I've been trained to do efficiently in live demos, but I'll get the hang of it in a few seconds. Let me stop sharing for a second and I represent the other window. All right, here we go.
Yeah, I can see it.
You can see it, lovely.
I was talking and I was on mute. I was saying that Reformed is asking if they can get the slides later. I put the link to the report that you guys, or the blog that you guys made. I'm not sure if it already has that information in there, but it's up to you if you want to share the slides after.
It has all the information except the demo, so I would say enjoy the demo right now. So what you're seeing here on the left, the WS Hard is our implementation of both a server and a client. So I'm going to start a server.
Uh-oh. You disappeared. I think if you don't mind, if you can increase the font a little bit, it's often a challenge for people to see things on screens. Thank you. Perfect.
Let me zoom in quite hard here, zoom in quite hard here as well.
Sure.
And let's go. So here I've started the server. So now it's waiting for a backdoor to connect. And I think I might have accidentally started the backdoor already. So let me kill that one. And then here, let's go. Yes, indeed. So now the backdoor is active. So that means that if I go to this URL, and please allow for Firefox a few seconds to open it. Here we are, and zoom in. So here we are actively on the backdoor. So I should be able to browse the file system. That's a bit too much zoomed in. So I get the full UI. I can browse. I can go to the users. I can go to the public directory. So I can really use that backdoor to browse the entire system remotely.
Yeah.
I also have. Yeah, go ahead, Didier.
Yeah, that's the HTML and things that you mentioned then. So. Indeed. And also, if you can go back to your command lines, just to make it clear that everybody is following along, what you see on the left, that's a C2 that Maxime wrote, so that it behaves like the C2, and what you see on the right is the real malware.
Indeed. So I've started the real malware on the right, and that one is the one with which we are interacting here. So this is the one which allows me to browse the file system as I want. I also have the ability to use the API. So for example, as you can see here in the public folder, those are the existing folders. I can create, for example, the NVISO folder. So let me send the request. It told me, okay, it has been created. So if I refresh the page, you'll here see that the NVISO folder has been created. Within the folder, I also have the ability to browse the file system and upload files. So for example, this is a simple example. Let me upload it. Upload start. Upload is already done. It's a short file. We get a SHA-256 confirmation of the file that was uploaded. And when we go back, we should now see that in that folder, if I refresh it, the file indeed has been staged by the backdoor. You can click on it to download it. Here, for example, it's a simple text message that you would get.
Yeah, Maxime, there's a question for you in the.
Oops. Let me. Did you patch the C2 address in the real malware sample? So yes, I did. I could have done without. So by modifying the hosts file, for example, as you can see, the VM is fully isolated. So I could have done so. But just from a security perspective, because we investigated this, we did this while the C2 was still active. It's an investigation from a few months ago. So to be sure, we did just replace the C2 address with some random addresses. So I think you should see it here. Yeah. So this is the actual one that we put in there with a top-level domain name .redacted, which would not redirect to the actual C2 to avoid accidental leaks.
Yeah, that's to make it clear. So the address, it's a domain name, it's a URL, it's not an IP address. So we could also have, for example, fiddled with the DNS to be able to redirect it. That would be another way to do this.
Indeed. What's also making this easy is that the malware does not perform SSL validation, so we can redirect it to whatever we want. It has its advantages for the adversary, meaning that if there is some form of proxy or so on, the malware will operate. The negative point for the adversary is that we have the capability to more easily intercept this.
Yeah. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I get a question coming in on Discord. So did you want to finish your thought first, or do you want me to ask you?
Yeah. So what I also want to say is just for some of you, if you might not be that familiar with patching binaries or malware. So there is here a hard-coded C2 address, and it's not obfuscated. You can just easily see it if you do a strings command, or if you look at it with a binary editor. And so you can just with the binary editor in the program change that address as long as it's not longer than the original address, the same size or shorter. Then you can make that to work, and that works with a lot of malware samples, unless they are obfuscated. But in my experience, I don't know about you, Maxime, might be different, but in my experience, APT malware doesn't use a lot of code obfuscation itself. Common malware uses a lot of obfuscation, which makes it harder, but APTs, they are not much into that, in my experience at least. And I believe, it's a supposition of mine, but I believe also that they do that to lower the chance to getting detected, because there are antiviruses and EDRs out there who actually search for malware by searching for obfuscation techniques, see? And so by using those obfuscation techniques, you sometimes make it easier to get detected than while you wouldn't use them.
Yeah, indeed, Didier. So on the screen, people can see indeed the patched malware sample, where we can see how it's just in plain text, and the C2 address has been replaced for the analysis. And then, Didier, I totally agree that obfuscation and other evasion techniques often lead to detection. So for common tooling, if you have, for example, Cobalt Strike or Mimikatz, there people are going to rely on obfuscation because they're using a tool that is well known, which is extensively signatured by antivirus vendors. So there people have to hide what it is doing. For original malware, and when I say original, not in the way it was created, but for things that have been really created for these kind of intrusions, antiviruses and EDRs don't have the existing signatures, and there indeed obfuscating is a risk, because a lot of AVs hunt for obfuscation techniques, for injection techniques. We ourselves have specific rules on VirusTotal where we hunt for all your small shellcode that you obfuscate and pack and so on, because that's where we discover potential new techniques. But for an APT, we haven't often seen obfuscation indeed.
Mm-hmm.
So the question that got posted on Discord, I put it in the chat, but I'll put it on the screen as well.
So elaborate on how BRICKSTORM uses DNS over HTTPS. So that I'll answer in a bit. We've got a few slides to to cover its command and control protocol. So let's head over to there. Allow me a few seconds again to switch screens.
Cool. All right. Checking Discord. Couple more questions over there as well. I'll just post them and you can decide when you want to answer them.
Okay.
All right, let me put that one back up. There we go.
Here we go. Thanks a lot. All right. So with the demo done, let's move over to the next one, which is actually the protocol. So perfect. Let's get started. So how does BRICKSTORM operate? So BRICKSTORM actually resolves its DNS over HTTPS. So instead of using regular DNS, which is actually plain text, BRICKSTORM uses DNS over HTTPS, which actually makes the request encrypted. The request goes to very popular DNS providers. So we have Quad9, which are awesome in helping us through the investigation. So they really helped us, provided a hand on getting some actual telemetry to scope how many organizations were impacted. You had other ones in the list, such as NextDNS, Cloudflare, and Google. Once BRICKSTORM resolves its command and control server, it will connect to that server, which is typically a serverless provider. So we were able to find samples which leverage Cloudflare, and then more historical, so older samples which leverage Heroku. For that one, it also established an HTTPS connection. So from the get-go, BRICKSTORM leverages encrypted protocol to resolve its command and control server. Why do we say optional DNS resolution? So in the more recent sample, we found that BRICKSTORM had the capability to directly embed the IPs of the serverless provider. So organizations such as Cloudflare, for example, they don't often change IPs. They have large pools, so they might get new IPs, but they rarely deprecate IPs from their CDN network. So BRICKSTORM has the ability to actually already embed the IPs of the CDN in the malware, which even removes the DNS over HTTPS resolution. Once the HTTPS connection is established, BRICKSTORM will create a WebSocket connection. So we know, due to an OPSEC mistake of the adversary, that they have, behind the Cloudflare workers, they have a second-tier infrastructure. We'll cover the OPSEC mistake later on. But basically, the Cloudflare worker proxy the connection to their second server, and then over this, they establish a WebSocket. This is quite funny because when we did the analysis during the incident, I remember that with Didier, we were disagreeing on what we were seeing. I don't know, Didier, if you want to explain it.
Yeah, I remember it. I told you that I found XOR encoding, and that I found communication over a WebSocket, and that I found XOR encoding. If I remember correctly, it was with a 4-byte key, XOR. And then later on, I realized, and Maxime had already realized it, but I realized that I was actually just reversing the WebSocket protocol itself, so that XOR part is not part of BRICKSTORM. I mean, it's not developed by the APT group, but it's just the standard WebSocket protocol that does this.
Indeed. So typically when we get those kinds of samples during an incident where that time is of the essence, Didier was doing the dynamic analysis, I was doing the reversing. I was getting annoyed because I couldn't find where in the malware it was doing XOR encryption. Turns out that indeed it was just, it's part of the WebSocket protocol. So once the WebSocket is established with their second tier server, the malware establishes a new TLS connection over the WebSocket. So this means that even if an organization has a TLS proxy, which would detect the outer layer, so it would detect this HTTPS. So if an organization even has the ability to intercept this one, the inner layer TLS is never going to be decrypted. So this tunnel is already quite secure for the malware. Even if it doesn't do certificate validation, these 2 layers of encryption already make it very hard to intercept the traffic in an organization. If this is not enough, the malware over that WebSocket with embedded TLS creates an additional TLS connection, which it is going to multiplex. So that means that in total, we have 3 levels of TLS, which is also a reason that we suspect that beyond the Vultr server, there might be another second tier or third tier infrastructure, and it's going to multiplex that connection. So it means that with a single connection, it will be able to handle multiple operators. So it can, for example, have multiple APT operators browsing the file system over that single nested connection. Let me take a quick look at the chat to see if we have answered. So if you only had one metric to find threats, process creation, logon events, Yara hashes, what do you pick and why? If I had to hunt an organization and I had to rely on this, I would personally go for network visibility to give you the ability to run IDS rules, because network actually gives you the ability to see. Network contains a lot. It will give you the same visibility as a firewall. You will see where the connection go. You will see DNS requests. You will see non-encrypted traffic. So I think that real network visibility, something like a security onion, is really valuable. And then the other one I would do is Yara, just because I like Yara. It allows you to find new things. But I'm sure that things like an EDR are a lot more valuable. I don't know, Didier, what your opinion is on this one?
Well, it also depends, on the environment you're in. For example, I know corporate environments where they don't use DNS over HTTPS at all. They don't use it. They even block it. So if you would watch out for that traffic and monitor for that traffic, you would easily spot it because it's uncommon in that environment. And by that, I mean, what is the best thing to do? Well, it depends a bit on your environment. And let me also add that the developers here really thought about operating inside a corporate environment. For example, a corporate environment will often have proxies, web proxies, that you cannot connect directly to the internet as a user, as a staff of the operation of the corporation, but that you have to go through the proxies and even authenticate to the proxies. And WebSockets, for example, work very well over proxies. Proxies also support WebSockets, and so they can establish their C2 channel also over proxies without problem by using those WebSockets. And also thinking of something else now that I'm talking about proxies. So we talk about resolution here, like DNS. In my experience, not a lot of corporations do logging of their DNS requests, of their DNS servers. So they don't actually have logging, so a history of the requests that have been done. Now, since this sample here works with HTTPS over DNS, and actually the HTTP over DNS servers are hard-coded in the malware, and so it is connecting to them. That also goes over a proxy if you're in a corporate environment with a proxy. And all of the organizations that I know with a proxy, they do logging of the request. So in that case, you would have at least a logging that there have been connections or attempts connections to DOH servers. And if you do TLS interception, then you would also be able to see the query itself and the answer.
All right, I hope that we answered the question with that. For the questions regarding the mitigations, we'll address that near the end of the presentation, where we provide some actionable techniques to solve the problem. And then for the hash of BRICKSTORM, we'll share a link to our report if it hasn't been done yet. Within that report, you'll find the links, the domains, and so on. The samples are not public on VirusTotal, as far as I know, but you're more than welcome to hunt in your environment and find new variants, obviously. Cool. So for the infrastructure, here we're going to see which mistakes or decisions by the adversary actually provided us with valuable insight during the incident. So a quick background on the certificate transparency logs. So the certificate transparency logs is a log where TLS certificates which are issued, so the certificates used for HTTPS, are actually recorded. Typically, a certificate is recorded in 2 logs from different vendors, which is the industry standard, if I'm not mistaken. Wildcard certificates also allow at most 1 level of wildcards. So for example, wildcard.nviso.eu, it's a valid certificate. It will be valid for foo.nviso.eu as well as bar.nviso.eu. But 2 levels of wildcard, so wildcard.wildcard.nviso.eu is invalid as a certificate. So you cannot have a wildcard certificate on NVISO.eu for the foo.bar.nviso.eu domain. No, what does this mean? Well, the first sample that we found, the old sample, actually had a C2, which is msazure.herokuapp.com. However, it's a CDN, it's a cloud provider, and Heroku Web has a wildcard certificate. So they have wildcard.herokuweb.com, which is valid for the C2 server. This means that we can't get any insights from the certificate transparency logs. Where it becomes quite handy is for the other C2 that we had, which is msazure.azuredatastore.workers.dev. This one has a subdomain, which means that the wildcard.workers.dev certificate would be invalid for that subdomain. We were able to find certificates for wildcard.azuredatastore.workers.dev, which is more granular, which means that in the certificate transparency logs, we can see when the infrastructure for that newer C2 was registered. So as an example, so this one are the certificate transparency log from a cert.sh, awesome tool, by the way, which really helps. And here you can see that already in late 2022, the infrastructure for the Backdoor was set up. So this is really a long-running operation, and this really provided us insights into the minimal scope for the investigation. Another mistake that the adversary made is that while we were watching the infrastructure for months, we actually called a maintenance period. So Didier explained previously that we have the ability with our own servers and our own clients. So we were watching the C2 to just out of curiosity see what was happening, if it was maintained or so on. And on one day, we actually noticed that the web server was down, and we saw in the error message from Cloudflare what the second server behind it is. So here we see that it's an IP.nip.io. So nip.io provides free DNS for anyone. It's handy if, for example, you want to register Let's Encrypt certificates without owning a domain. You can use nip.io for that. What's also interesting for us is that we can see which hosts the adversary actually pointed their infrastructure to. So with this bit of information, we were able to know, all right, this is the likely architecture of the adversary. We know that they use Cloudflare as a first tier, and we know that they use a Vultr appliance as a second tier. We don't know if they have a third tier or not. So the analysis of the malware and the protocol suggests that either they have a third tier or that the third layer TLS connection goes straight to the operator. Another bit of interesting is that during the maintenance period, we actually noticed that they changed the inner TLS certificate. So if you remember, there are 3 layers of TLS. The outer layer is the one managed by the legitimate cloud provider. So that one is a certificate which is valid 90 days. It's going to decrease in the future, but it's not a valuable certificate. But the second TLS certificate, it's managed by the attacker. And so during our monitoring period of the infrastructure, we actually saw that they renewed the certificate after eviction had occurred, for example, for this specific intrusion. So this means that even though the campaign was called on our end, the attackers still deemed the infrastructure as interesting to to them. So that likely meant or indicated the possibility that there are more victims than just the one compromise that we were investigating at the time. So this is also a small heads up. So for all the red teamers out there who are looking to improve their OPSEC, well, if you're using self-signed certificates and on top of that you don't perform certificate validation, mind the timestamps that you put in your certificates, because this really gives us blue teamers points to pivot on. This is the kind of metadata that you can easily remove from your certificates. A couple of key takeaways before we'll delve into the rest of the questions. So what we learned that could help you. So the first thing is that BRICKSTORM is a combination. It's a new tool, but it definitely leveraged old tricks. So the BRICKSTORM campaign had persistence through scheduled tasks and on Linux through RC scripts. So in your environment, even if you're afraid of backdoors, of APTs using new tools, even though they leverage new tools, they often have to rely on old tricks for persistence. They might find new tricks, but throughout the intrusion, it is unlikely that they only leverage new tricks. So do keep hunting in your environment for things like scheduled tasks, unknown services, startup items, and so on. Another thing that we did learn was that campaign monitoring has value. So the long-term monitoring of infrastructure often does reveal interesting information. For red teamers, this is also something which is quite interesting to know, is mind your infrastructure. If you've done an intrusion using a specific infrastructure, be mindful about what you link to that. So blue teamers such as the DME, we often look at things like passive DNS and historical port scans of the appliances. And it already has happened a few times that we think we found an intrusion, and then during the analysis, during the pivoting on the infrastructure, we find it being linked to other IOCs for which we know that it was a red team because we caught it in the past. So it's not the first time that we've seen a red team actually disclose being a red team because their infrastructure is linked to previous intrusions. And then another one, which is a bit less relevant for red teamers, but from a blue team perspective, we've definitely seen that the China-nexus groups have really increased their campaigns over the last years. So for actual organizations out there and blue teamers, do consider long-term espionage as part of your threat model. Another thing to discuss, I see that I don't have the slide for that one, but one thing that was asked were how the mitigations can be taken for these. So the first obvious mitigation is to harden your network. So things like DNS over HTTPS is definitely something that you want to block on your firewall. If you have your corporate DNS, block any DNS which doesn't go through your own server. HTTPS over DNS can easily be flagged, so it typically goes to popular DNS servers such as Google or Port9, for example. But instead of using the port 53, which would be for plain text DNS, they are using port 443, for example. Other ones are just generic threat hunting recommendations. So the old tricks, as we mentioned them. So look for known persistence mechanisms and so on. Look for abnormal for operations outside of normal operating hours. So if your company is, for example, based in Europe, what is the likelihood that an administrator is operating at 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning? It's quite unlikely, and it could be indicative that some credentials are being abused. I don't know, Didier, if there are some additional tips that you want to give?
I think maybe you could open the report to show the Yara rules. I don't know if you could do that,
yes,
because
definitely.
you don't have them in the slides, I think.
No, indeed. Just give me a second to pull up the PDF.
No problem. So you will see these are the Yara rules that we developed to detect these samples. And once they will be on the screen, you will see that it contains clear text, and that's because, so I mean, we use clear text in those Yara rules, and that's because there isn't much obfuscation in the samples.
It's funny that
Alright.
while we're waiting, Didier, if you want to answer that one question, it's one that comes up almost every stream. How are you finding AI in relation to malware analysis? Do you see it disrupting the job market?
I think that's a question for Maxime, because you have been using AI in your analysis.
I haven't, no.
No, okay.
No, I know that quite some awesome reversers have worked on integrating AI into their workflow. There is one specific person from Kaspersky, if I remember correctly, I forgot his name, apologies for that, who built a plugin for IDA Pro in order to integrate AI with it. I haven't found use of it yet, mostly because AI might explain, might give me the answer, but if I don't understand why the answer is as is, I won't be able to understand the needy details about the specific malware. And often in malware also, in backdoors or in shellcode, specific operations are used, but not for the intended original usage of it. So they find techniques, for example, to insert callbacks or to have injection occur through specific objects, which have nothing to do with the malware, but it's just because it's one of the techniques used to achieve their injection or their hollowing or whatever you want to call it. So I like to really manually understand what the malware is doing.
Yeah,
it seems like oftentimes you got to lead the witness, right? You have to like kind of help it get to the answer. But I have seen some good use cases where it's auto analysis and like adding comments and things like that. And malware that's obviously has no symbols has been pretty useful.
Yeah. And what I've also been using it, but these are simple examples. I'm sure viewers have also been doing that, but is if you get a small piece of obfuscated JavaScript or a small piece of obfuscated PowerShell, you ask ChatGPT, for example, to explain what it does, and often it can clearly explain what it actually does. Now, the only thing what I would caution for is once you get the explanation, try to validate that explanation. For example, through dynamic analysis, validate what the ChatGPT said, or do yourself a bit of analysis just to trying to validate some pieces, because you can have wrong answers or sometimes total hallucinations from your ChatGPT.
So we've put on the screen the Yara rules, which is what Didier mentioned. So I don't know if you want to explain Yara.
No. But could you just zoom in them a bit, because
yes.
I can see the DNS over ACT because I know they are there. Okay. So you see, we are looking for different strings in the sample, like WSS ://. So that is the protocol for encrypted WebSockets, secure WebSockets. We are also looking for golang.org because this is written in the Go language. And then you see all of those DNS servers, DNS over HTTPS servers that the malware is using, and then get file, put file, slice up file, MD file. These are a couple of commands. So these are all strings that are particular to the malware sample itself, and this is how we develop then Yara rules to try to detect the samples. Now, what you want to avoid is that your rules will trigger too much false positives, that it would trigger, for example, on legitimate software, and that it would create a hit, and then you would have to investigate that false positive and waste time over that. So the things we do, for example, is to do a retro hunt with that on VirusTotal. That's, for example, one thing we can do. So what is a retro hunt? When you have a paid VirusTotal subscription, you get more features than you have with an unpaid account, a free account, I mean. And one of the things you can do is called a retro hunt. So you give VirusTotal a set of Yara rules, and then it will use these Yara rules, scan its complete database, depending on the subscription that you have, and it will list you all of the hashes for the files that have a match. So one technique that we use to validate this, that it doesn't throw too much false positives, is just let it run through VirusTotal, see what hits that we have, and then look at those samples that were detected and see if these are really new samples. And that's a byproduct of doing then the validation. That is that we find new samples that we are pivoting. But if we find false positives, then we try to figure out why we have the detection and update our Yara rules so to eliminate those false positives. And would this malware have been heavily obfuscated, then we would not be able to do things like that. Look for Golang, look for those commands, look for those servers. Then we would actually have to figure out how the bytes of the obfuscation actually appear in the file and maybe use those. But then your problem is that your detection rule is most likely not so generic, because probably the obfuscation in another sample will be different. And so that won't help. So in this case here, like I said, because they don't use often obfuscation, it makes our rule development a bit easier.
What is the reason again behind that as to why they choose not to use obfuscation?
Well, that's our interpretation. We actually are not in contact with APT groups. We can't say for sure why they do this, but our interpretation is to avoid detection, because you have antivirus signatures, you have EDR heuristics that will not look for malicious behavior, but who will look for obfuscation techniques. Okay, and then trigger on the obfuscation techniques.
So interesting. A couple other questions. Here's one. Were known attacks limited to European companies? Are there particular vertical markets being targeted?
So the ones we observe, because we're a European company who heavily focuses on the European markets, we're indeed located in Europe. But we know, based off at least the MITRE report, that it goes beyond Europe. If I'm not mistaken, MITRE is US based, which means that it's at least targeting Western organizations. Also, given the profile of the attributed actor, which is aligned to Chinese interests, we could assume that this malware is likely used against Western organizations. For the verticals, I think whatever fits the adversary's taste. So we have MITRE, which is in research. We have I cannot discuss the others, but I don't think we should limit ourselves to the specific verticals, but look more specifically into the entire field of interests of the Chinese operators.
Great. Here's another one. How are most of these actors able to get the malware installed in the first place? 0 days are few and far between. Is it unpatched systems, careless users with admin access?
It's all of them. However they entered, I know that specific clusters have their preferred method. So, for example, this one is a UNC, which, according to Mendiant, likes or prefers initial access through 0 days. We've seen them in Ivanti. We've seen them use other kind of 0 days. So they like 0 days, but no vulnerability is too old to get used. If you look at the non-exploited vulnerabilities list from CISA, we've got vulnerabilities which are 5-10 years old. If they're still applicable, adversaries will leverage them to get into the network.
Great. What do we have here? What's the best tool for Golang samples analysis?
So what I use two specific tools. The first one sadly an expensive one. So it's either pro, it's something oriented for organizations. It really helps the workflow. I haven't tested Ghidra for a few years, so it might be that Ghidra caught up on that one. And another one that I really like, let me see if I can join the chat to paste the link. No, but I'll put it in the private chat and I will let you copy that one over. But it's redress. So redress is one that I love to use for the initial analysis of the file. So instead of decompiling the entire file and so on, redress is really going to dump all the valuable information. It's going to give me all the available structures of the sample. I'm going to see the function names and so on. And this really gives me a fast idea about what the sample is potentially up to.
Yeah, I just want to add, Maxime, because you said IDA Pro is an expensive tool. That's certainly true, but they have changed their business model a bit. And for example, for students, it has become way less expensive to be able to use IDA Pro.
Definitely, you can use. I think you can use it for free at home now. So it has cloud decompilers, which is not fit for all the organizations if you have to retain the data. But definitely do give IDA Pro a try at home during your cracking challenges and so on.
Great. Next question. If you have polymorphic malware, at least one that generates a different obfuscation pattern for each sample, do you rely on the network DNS stuff and make rules for that as a higher priority?
So the polymorphic, it's a bit a special one because malware is not the only element in your intrusion. So I haven't seen a case where adversaries are lazy. So already typically when they deploy malware in an organization, it has happened more often than once that we either find the same hashes or the same C2. So we often have an overlap which allows the clustering. Even if they don't do that, they reuse their TTPs. So they reuse the way that they are actually achieving persistence. They reuse the accounts they're using and so on. So we can definitely pivot on more than just the hash or the Yaris signature of a specific file. I don't know, Didier, if you have other techniques that you like to employ?
Well, here in that case, if possible, see if there is a pattern in the polymorphic algorithm, and then try to detect that algorithm. So not the true IOCs, but work on the obfuscation method. And I also want to add, Maxime, when you say they are lazy, well, what we have also seen a couple of times is when they do an upgrade of the malware, that they just leave the old malware in place. So then we have multiple copies of the sample.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's possible. So here a remark, maybe the AI will be good for detecting polymorphic patterns. Absolutely, that could be true. But I have no insights on that.
The key BRICKSTORM functionalities, I see as the next highlighted question. So mostly we saw it used for network tunneling. So it really acted as a tunnel or a VPN for the adversary. This really was its key usage because if you tunnel network, you can have your remote code execution over SMB RDP. You can have file exfiltration, but as well over SMB, for example. So no need to use that fancy GUI. So it's really the network tunneling which was of use. No, obviously the other big capability is the command execution. Although the command execution was not available in a Windows sample, either because it is an older variant of the one observed by MITRE and Mandiant, or because they just decided that on Windows they had sufficient other code execution alternatives.
Great. I think that's all for questions.
All right, lovely.
Okay.
Great. Well,
that was really interactive. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining. Thanks for all your contributions to the community, especially Didier. You know, you're a little older than Maxime, so been around. But I think everyone working in the malware space has certainly used your tools over the years. But Great. Cool. Thanks, Tyson. Appreciate it. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on. And this video, of course, be on YouTube afterwards. So, check that out. Keep an eye out for questions there. People do post periodically. So if you want to, I'll let you know as well. If I see some good questions, I'll ping you so you can get back to them.
Okay.
Awesome. But thanks so much. Have a great rest of your week. And again, we'll see you on Thursday for a session on fuzzing Linux kernel modules. So a little bit more on the exploit dev side. But thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Have fun
Thanks.
fixing
Bye.
Linux. Bye.
Bye.